I had a free evening lately, so like any person who has a free evening, I went straight to the nearest movie theater to watch the newest superhero movie, The Flash. This is the fifth superhero movie that I've seen this year, and this should probably be concerning. So initially I was gonna make a video about The Flash, but shortly about it. The Flash is an absolutely mediocre movie. It feels like a DC attempt to replicate Spider-Man No Way Home, jump on this multiverse hype train that seems to be gaining momentum right now. But somewhere along the way they just forgot that they also need to make a decent movie. So many people like No Way Home and Spider-Verse movies, especially Spider-Verse movies, because they are actually good, not just because of the multiverse. Even though No Way Home would be absolutely passable without all the fan service. But you know, using fan service right is also a kind of art, because in the Flash fan service doesn't work as the studio probably intended. But the main purpose of The Flash, and the reason why it's being released despite all the controversy surrounding Ezra Miller, is of course to reboot the DCU and start it all anew. Fresh beginning. CGI was quite terrible, but it wasn't even the worst part of the movie. The thing that ruined the experience for me is its abysmal humor. For comparison, a similar scene from Sonic the Hedgehog movie works so much better and is so much more creative and exciting to watch. Even though two scenes have a similar purpose, they are simply miles apart from each other. There are so many terrible jokes in The Flash. It feels like this movie treats its audience like the average age of viewers is 10 years old, no more. Or like the audience are complete idiots who constantly need to hear something funny, or otherwise they get bored and start rioting. This is not the problem of this movie exclusively, of course. Hollywood in general has this problem. I know that there are many great and serious movies being released every month that most people overlook. Only a small number of those non-mainstream movies actually gain some serious attention from people. But I'm not talking about these kinds of movies right now. I'm talking about movies that are made to make huge sums of money. You know, blockbusters, especially superhero stuff these days, and animated films by big companies. Hollywood for some reason thinks that we can't watch a movie without jokes. DCU was started by Zack Snyder 10 years ago. Man of Steel and Batman v Superman were the first movies of this new DC universe. Both movies were not as successful as expected. They weren't exactly loved by critics and the general audience. Their box office was not that impressive. Batman v Superman earned almost $300 million less than Marvel's Captain America Civil War, which was released about a month and a half later. But what was the problem? Why could a movie featuring the most iconic and recognizable DC characters not even reach 900 million at the box office? Especially considering that movies about Black Panther and Captain Marvel, obviously not the most famous superheroes, easily break $1 billion milestone. Maybe as a guess, these two movies, at least their theatrical versions, weren't really good enough. Maybe Zack Snyder and the team just needed to make better movies. Obviously making better movies is seldom a solution. The studio decided that the problem was that Man of Steel and Batman v Superman were too dark and too serious for a generic audience. And so the next DCU movies became very light-hearted and more like the MCU instead of having their own unique style and their own distinguishable personality. Judging by this logic, movies like Joker, The Batman, and Dune, if we talk broader than just superhero stuff, should have all flopped. These movies almost do not have any jokes, they are serious and mature, and they're also all good. People like them in general, and Joker even broke the $1 billion barrier at the box office, even though nobody could predict that before the movie started storming the theaters. This shows that people do not crave a joke every 3 minutes, and people can watch serious stuff on the big screen and enjoy it too. These three movies are an exception though. Vast majority of blockbusters are trying to be extremely goofy. When it comes to comedy, there is a very fine line between being good and being completely absurd. For illustration, we can take two movies about Thor, both directed by the same person, Taika Waititi. Thor Ragnarok, despite having a huge amount of jokes, was a pretty enjoyable experience overall and tilted towards the good category. Thor Love and Thunder, however, completely fell into absurdity. The characters in this movie have very serious problems. The main villain, Gore the Butcher, lost his daughter and was betrayed by the gods he used to worship, so he decided to kill them all as a revenge for neglecting him and his daughter and leaving them to die. Thor lost his whole family, father, mother, sister, brother, and his homeland too. Moreover, he fought Thanos twice. The first time he failed to finish Thanos, and because of that half of the universe was erased. This is some serious psychological trauma. Thor was a very immature character in the first movie, despite being thousands of years old, but he was supposed to grow up as a person throughout the years and movies. However, he remains exactly the same as he was 10 years ago. Almost like the MCU doesn't want him to mature at all. MCU wants him to remain this way. And this of course can't not hurt Thor as a character. Another character, Jane Foster, is literally dying of cancer in the movie. But we don't get to feel the weight of her situation, because the characters feel an urge to joke every 5 minutes, or maybe even more frequently. As a result, the emotional side is completely diminished, and nothing feels serious enough. Love and Thunder was the worst MCU movie for 7 months, until Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was released, and that movie has zero redeeming qualities at all. Just take a look at MODOK. I must admit MODOK was threatening while wearing his helmet, but once he removed it, I could not help but feel like I was watching a high-budget version of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, one of the worst movies in existence. As I already said, I watched 5 superhero movies this year. Across the Spider-Verse is not flawless, but extremely good nonetheless. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is filled up to the brim with jokes, but it kind of works because the characters are extremely likable and James Gunn generally knows how to write comedy, even if somehow gets in over his head, but he knows how to control himself. Ant-Man and the Flash are terrible with humor. Concerning Shazam, I don't feel like criticizing it much. Shazam reminds me of kids' movies from the 90s that I used to watch on VHS as a kid. It's not even trying to look serious, it is exactly 2023 big budget VHS movie. But all these stories deal with actual problems. However, it's like we're not allowed to feel bad for the characters. Every dark and serious moment is interrupted by at least one joke. And rating also doesn't help. Humor in something like The Suicide Squad, also directed by James Gunn by the way, works much better than in something like Thor, because it's age restricted and not watered down. I think movies could have been funnier, in theory of course, if they were age restricted and if directors had more creative control over them. This is why I like Eternals. It is probably the only MCU movie apart from The Guardians with genuine creative vision from its director. Cartoons also suffer greatly. Animation has another problem. Most people in America and other Western countries for some reason think that animation is only for kids. Therefore, all the big companies produce animation aimed at younger audiences, and it's impossible to find mature adult-oriented cartoons in theaters. All we have is on streaming services. The more I go to the movies, the more I notice less and less people actually laugh. I'm not saying that movies should be devoid of any humor, a nice joke now and then never spoils anything. Audience needs some kind of relief from time to time. Even The Batman has some jokes.
Maybe we can talk about what they did to my partner's face.
Holy God, what are you showing me?
His head.
Come on!
Open your eyes!
But completely overshadowing serious moments with poor humor can completely ruin the whole perception of a movie, the whole experience. And this is exactly what's happening with blockbusters. It is almost impossible to take them seriously. It is impossible to care for the characters. And superhero stuff is not even the worst out there. Movies like Kong vs. Godzilla are devoid of any creativity, interesting characters and ideas. All they have is CGI monsters. Watching CGI monsters fighting each other with no adequate story and dialogues can exhaust you very fast. And it's not like CGI is super fantastic either. It's not Avatar: The Way of Water. And then there is the Fast and Furious saga. If you are into music, especially rock music, you're probably familiar with the term butt rock. Butt rock is used for bands that play absolutely bland radio-friendly music, often completely devoid of any musical or lyrical creativity to appeal to a wider audience. And they often pretty misogynistic as well. The most notable example is of course Nickelback. Fast and Furious is a cinema equivalent of butt rock, absolutely unoriginal, uncreative and boring, but super popular for some reason. Returning to The Flash, I do think I would have enjoyed this movie more if it was more serious. Serious tone wouldn't suddenly make this movie good, obviously, but at least less annoying and embarrassing. That's at least something. Batman v Superman isn't good, but I'd take it over Thor: Love and Thunder any day. Blockbuster movies weren't always this way, of course, but because of MCU's success, now too many franchises are trying to replicate it. And it hurts the industry in general. That will certainly change in the future, but when is an interesting question.